Hi, I'm Brad Dacus. Welcome to Faith and Law. We are right now at the People's Convention being sponsored by Turning Point USA here in Detroit, Michigan. Folks, we've had a number of great interviews. You're going to love them. Just watch. Hi, I'm Brad Dacus, President and founder of the Pacific Justice Institute. Welcome to Faith and Law. We're here live at the People's Convention here in Detroit, Michigan, being sponsored by Turning Point USA. It's been an exciting time, and we are blessed right now to have the opportunity to interview the attorney, David Peters, who heads up the PJI office that we have right here in Detroit, Michigan. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, I understand you have a major case right now involving an abortion clinic. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Brad, this has weighed on me. I would even, I'd lose it crying.
Yeah.
Thinking about this man. Our client is a pastor, okay? He's a pastor. He went to this clinic with the intention to save the life of babies. That's all.
Right.
And they've turned this into a conspiracy. Somehow our clients have conspired to violate the right to kill your baby. But the right to protest is somehow not even in there.
Right. Well, they have no problem letting those conspirators on university campuses burn the American flag and chant death to Jews in Israel and America. But then when it comes to a benevolent, loving pastor wanting to take a chance and step in and try to just save a baby that morning from being killed and murdered, didn't do anything physical to anyone in any way at all, but just the fact that he was there and went on the property, he's targeted. He didn't do anything. He wasn't robbing, wasn't doing anything for himself. He, along with others, were just trying to save a life that morning, save someone from being murdered.
That's right.
A preborn baby, and for that he's going to spend 11 years behind bars. How does that happen?
It happens because the Dobbs case was decided, which turned abortion back to the states. And then the Biden administration, Biden himself, said, we're going to make sure we do everything possible to expand and protect abortion. So he ordered his Justice Department to prosecute Christians around the country. They brought 3 test cases. They brought a case in D.C., the bluest area of the world. Right. Tennessee, which is pretty red, and Detroit, which is a nice blue. So these were test cases. They are currently 14-0. They have tried this case 14 times, the prosecutors. They've won 14 cases. And I want to tell you about this isn't our client, but in our case, there are 7 co-defendants. One of the co-defendants appeared in court in chains, handcuffed, belly chain, 80-year-old woman who can barely walk.
Kidding. Chained like a wild animal, 80-year-old woman can barely walk. So this isn't attempts by the Department of Justice and the Biden administration to just enforce the law. They're using the law as a weapon for ideology.
Yes.
I think one evidence of this is if you look at the FACE Act, they're quoting the FACE Act. This act is to protect abortion clinics from harm and violence, etc. But it's also to protect pro-life clinics. So tell me, how many pro-life clinics? We know many of them had lots of harm and damage, violence, vandalism, threats. How many of these pro-life clinics has the Biden administration decided to defend pursuant to the demands of the FACE Act?
They have not brought a single felony case. I believe they brought 2 misdemeanor cases against individuals who broke a bunch of stained glass windows in a church. Well, here's another example, Brad. The president gave a State of the Union address, all right? And some pro-Hamas terrorists delayed the president for 45 minutes. All right, they delayed the Supreme Court, the Congress, the Senate, the cabinet, the president, and 40 million people who are waiting to see the speech? No charges brought. But in our case, a single woman is delayed for an hour or two. And now we're looking at 11 years. I want to mention one thing, okay, Brad? The woman I mentioned, she's been in the news lately because she was just sentenced in the DC case. And the judge told her in a really evil, snarky way, well, if you're old and 2 years is a long time, but maybe you should try to stay alive because that's what your religion says. That's literally what this judge told this woman. And you can look it up. It's been in the news lately. I'll be sitting right next to her at the trial for about 4 weeks
That's
or
disgraceful.
so. Hopefully she won't be in handcuffs the whole trial.
Yeah, but this is just another example of the kind of treacherous judges that we are seeing, and generally at the state court level. Most of the federal courts aren't as bad because they had a lot of appointments by former President Donald Trump. But like the state court, like we've seen with the recently with regards to the challenges, Bragg and the others, Atlanta and et cetera, DC. We've seen a lot of these state court judges or local judges engage in outright shameful, tyrannical conduct. And I'm just glad that we've got the attorneys across the nation to stand up, not just to the injustices, but also to some degree to stand up to some of these judges and to show them that we're not going to take this sitting down. We're going to go to bat and defend people like that pastor who's being prosecuted so unjustly and unfairly, along with many others across the country. We now have 265 cases in active litigation. You have a chunk of those cases here in Michigan, I know. And David, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing to make a real difference right here in Detroit, Michigan, and even outside of Detroit. I know you're involved in some cases as well. So God bless you, David.
Michigan's a big place.
It is a big place. Thank you again, and
Thank you, Brad.
Keep up the great work.
God bless you.
You too.
Thank you.
Jack Posobiec, thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today.
Well, I really appreciate being here, and we're here in Detroit, and I remember asking Charlie, I said, why are we going to Detroit? Usually it's summertime, we go down to Miami, we go down to West Palm, Tampa, something like that, and he said, Jack, because this heartland where we are right now, the Midwest, the Rust Belt, Detroit is endemic of the things that have gone on with our country, a city which should be America's shining economic jewel of the Midwest. We don't want it to be the Rust Belt anymore. We actually want to return to steel and manufacturing and commerce and all of the things that made this city the motor city, one of the shining cities of the entire world. And the way that this city has slid in the last 30 to 40 years is very endemic of what's going on with our entire country. And so we're here, we're in Detroit, we're planting our flag, a place where they said no conservatives or no populists would ever be welcome, and we're bringing 10,000 people in to show them that it can be done.
Yeah, Charlie Kirk is doing such a great job heading up Turning Point USA. And I agree. When people, they said, well, where is it going to be? Is it going to be in Dallas? Is it going to be in Nashville or Miami? I said, no, it's going to be in Detroit. They go, Detroit? Like, Detroit? But it's interesting. This city, you're absolutely right. It used to be in its heyday, and now it has shrunk. The population has shrunk, I think, by 40%, 50%. And it has lots of problem with crime. During the last election, it was one of the center points of alleged fraud and corruption.
Believe it or not, did you know that we are currently sitting in the actual building where the ballots were counted in 2020? This is the very building. Back then it was actually called the TCF Center. It's changed names now to, I believe it's called the Huntington Center now, but we are in the very building. I think some of these were the same rooms where those ballots were counted. So we were doing a podcast last night and we said we returned to the scene of the crime.
Yeah, I remember when they told the poll workers or the poll watchers, you stand outside where you can't see anything. And then and it was just so
this is where they put
corrupt.
This is where they put the where they covered the windows.
Right.
That's this building.
Yeah, and so the poll watchers were outside, couldn't look in, couldn't see anything. I guess it was just like, just trust us.
Most safest and securest election of all time.
Yeah. So it is ironic that we're here now. You have an interesting bio. You're a social media influencer, definitely. Also senior editor of Human Events News, host of Human Events Daily, and a veteran intelligence officer with the Navy, which I find extremely intriguing.
Thank you.
So you've got a lot of interesting background, and of course your book title recently that you came out with was Unhumans, The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them. I think that's going to be very interesting because I know in the past we've often looked at, communism's always sort of been a threat, and we sort of thought, well, after the Iron Curtain went down, the communist threat's done, Soviet Union's over. I remember in the 80s giving a speech on the threat of communism, to get one of my scholarships to college, and then it sort of turned into no longer being an issue, and yet it really is an issue. So what do you see with regard to the signs of communism, that it's showing that it's not just a thing of the past, especially now?
Absolutely. So it's a great question, and the book really is, I think, appropriately timed. We've been working on this for years. It's actually comes out of a series that I was doing on my podcast that we've decided to coalesce and turn into a book. So we started with China, we were doing France and Spain and Russia and some of the great famous communist revolutions of the past, and then tying them into things that we see today. And what we realized is, sort of by accident, we discovered a system. And we discovered a system that's been used by certain groups of people, agitators. We call them the Unhumans. They call themselves different names in different places. In France, they were the Jacobins, and that's sort of a proto-communism. And then Russia, of course, that is the actual Bolsheviks. In Spain, they're the Rojos. And then in Mao's China, they become the Chinese Communist Party. But of course, they're always using the same exact tactics to destabilize, subvert, and infiltrate a nation. And so it's very interesting that you mentioned the end of the Cold War, because this is the point where they switch tactics. And a lot of people miss this, and there are even people who are anti-communists from an economic perspective, and they say, well, wait a minute, Cold War ended, Soviet Union's gone, red flags aren't flying everywhere except China and Cuba, but what are we fighting? I said, well, this is what they realized. Because capitalism was so successful going around the world and lifting people out of poverty, and creating middle classes in countries that never had them before ever. Most societies around the world sort of had a pyramid structure where you've got a little bit at the top, you've got a wide swath at the bottom, and then some people that are there in the middle, your merchant guilds and things like this. But it was capitalism that creates this diamond shape that we had in the United States. So now you've got this huge, wide middle class. And so this became a problem and an impediment and a challenge for the communists, because how do I get the workers of the world to revolt if they're actually doing pretty well? So they threw the economics mostly out the window, and they switched to a new tactic, sociology. And when I say sociology, I'm talking culture, I'm talking religion, I'm talking ethnicity, race, gender, all of the things that you hear are the hot button issues of today. Well, all they've done is taken that communist lens of oppressor and oppressed and switched it from the economic channel and the economic lane to the sociological lane, and suddenly they found a way that they could once again divide society, pit people against each other, and then use the same tactic that's been used since Julius Caesar back in Gaul, divide and conquer.
So this is what you meant in your book, I guess, when you talked about the new wave of revolution being irregular. It's no longer focusing on, who the haves and the have-nots. It's focusing on what social group you're a part. Are you part of an oppressed social group versus an oppressor social group?
Yes.
Okay.
And so the concept of the irregular warfare is also a tactic. And in fact, communism itself is a tactic, as we describe in the book. It's not sure, there's philosophy books you can read about communism and ideological books. This isn't one of them. This describes communism as a tactic, and specifically a system that we discovered. And the concept of the irregular warfare, so this is drawing on my knowledge as an intelligence officer, knowing that warfare has changed. This is not the Civil War anymore. Warfare has gone through various iterations and various generations over time as new technologies have advanced. And I think most people kind of know this. So the Civil War is sort of the precursor to modern warfare. Then we get World War I. World War II is, of course, the great guerrilla warfare. Yes, exactly. This becomes a huge advent in the Civil War, going in through modern warfare. Then with the rise of Al-Qaeda and terrorism, now suddenly you have more asymmetric warfare. And in asymmetric warfare, it's the enemy isn't just in uniform and on the battlefield, it's the enemy could be anyone, the enemy could be in disguise. And with the rise now of social media, we see 5th generation warfare. And in 5th generation warfare, the war does occasionally have these kinetic skirmishes, but it's mostly waged on these little pieces of glass that we all hold in our hands every day, and the notifications you get across the screen, and text messages and group chats and social media, and then eventually spills over into actual kinetic events like we saw. Usually I was when we first were writing the book, we were talking about the summer of 2020, but now I'm talking more and more about the spring of 24 and what we saw on campus, because that was social media driven. And so this is why, just to put a pin on it, people will say to me, well, there's no revolution going on. I can walk around outside and things seem generally okay. Crime is up, but that's not a revolution. That's just crime. And I say, okay, but walk down the street and say something that breaks with the conventional political dogma of the day. Go walk down the street and say you think Trump won the 2020 election. Walk down the street and say you don't think the vaccines prevent the spread of COVID. Walk down the street and say you don't think Anthony Fauci is a gift from God or something like this. And you will see these angry psychopaths immediately turn on you. And so this is what I say. There's
especially in the cities.
Precisely. So it's an irregular revolution that occasionally spills over from this virtual social 5G world that we now live in into the real world.
Yeah, I know TikTok has been cited for influencing our society.
Of course.
There are reports that outside influences like China, maybe Russia, may be using social media to influence the election. Not directly, but putting out ads and things without identifying where they're from, making accusations, maybe even using AI to create false interviews, false messaging from people who never said certain things.
For the viewers, this might be AI right now. You have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It is pretty shocking. I mean, when you see what we're faced with now. Why did you come out with this book now? Because people have been looking at this threat of communism for 20 years plus, and the increasing of uprisings. Why now?
Sure. Well, I think the reason that it's been so important for us as we've gone through, and even in my life, so I spent several years living in China, living in Shanghai, when I was just out of college. Then I joined the military and had a focus on the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army, and then eventually, as I moved, my family's Polish by background, so a lot of stories about communism from those eras when Poland was occupied by the Soviet Union following the World War II, and actually ended up marrying. My wife was born in the Soviet Union, and so she moved here about 15 years ago, and she's not here right now. She'll be here later today, so I've got to figure that out. And
so she speaks Russian?
Boys. She does, yeah.
And you speak English and anything else?
Mandarin, actually.
Oh, and Mandarin?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, a little bit of Russian, a little bit of Polish, but Mandarin is my main one.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm sure that's really helpful to you in your work, in understanding what the Chinese are coming out with, what they're doing, what they're producing, what they're saying.
Most people have no idea. They have no clue what's going on when it comes to China. They can't even perceive of it. But one of the reasons, so certainly the rise of China, the rise of the BRICS nations is something that I've been tracking for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
But really, it's not even so much the external threats, because I think right now, currently, what we're facing is the largest threat to America is not external, it's internal. And what we're facing right here at home, there's a bit of overlap, because they create the external to internal through the channel of our open borders. And so by allowing illegals to come in, but also by weakening our institutions, and not only, by the way, are they trying to infiltrate our formal institutions of the Department of Justice or the school system or the churches, and yes, they are trying to infiltrate the churches as well. They're also trying to infiltrate our most sacred traditional institutions, and that, of course, being the institution of marriage, the institution of the family. The idea of the institution of the family is actually the oldest institution that we have evidence for. You can go into archaeological records, and we have, we find bone structures and graves and caves from 10,000, 15,000 years, and what do you see? Mother, father, children. Mother, father, children. It predates written history completely. And so to go after and destabilize the most central social unit that we have is their direct plan to defeat and completely overturn our society.
Well, that's what Stalin did. That's what Mao Zedong did. He was like, "Hey, we'll break up the family,
Yes.
and we'll give us the children, and we have the future."
If you can destabilize the family structure, and it actually starts by destabilizing the parents. So you destabilize the parents against each other, and then you destabilize the children against the parents. Chairman Mao, and we talk about this at great length in the book, during the Chinese Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, specifically used the children to target their parents. And he would go to them and say, and think about some of the parallels to things we see today, where they would go and they would be instructed to read Mao's Little Red Book. And this was the book of Mao's quotations. And then the children would come home and they would quiz their parents on whether or not they could complete a quote or reference something using a page number. Oh, what does it say on this page? Complete the quote. Political power grows from the barrel up, grows from what? And if you can't complete that, suddenly they would report their own parents.
And so many parents were taken.
And parents were taken
away and to camps and never to come back.
And unfortunately, many parents, by the way, even before that situation could take place, a lot of parents and principals and teachers actually committed suicide rather than face the struggle session or face the public trial, the public torture that they go through. And actually there's a Netflix show, Three Body Problem, that depicts this with a scientist, and he's put on struggle session before his children. And so the idea of reporting your own parents, it's already happening. You're already seeing this in high schools where kids are coming home and they're saying, "Oh, my mom and dad, they don't want to fly the pride flag, and they don't want to go in with wokeness, and they reject my gender belief and my new gender identity." And then they can go to the courts, so you think this is something that happened a long time, crazy thing that happened in China could never come here. But what happens if mom and dad don't affirm the gender identity that the school has given to the child? The child now believes that they are another gender. Mom and dad say no. Then they go to the courts. And who do you think the courts side with? The courts are going to side with the school, depending on the state.
Right.
And then the child is taken away.
Right.
This is the exact same playbook that we've seen. Different names, different. The names change, the titles change, but the actions are the same. It's the taking of children.
Absolutely. Jack, we at Pacific Justice Institute, we have offices all across the country, and this is one of our areas that we're actually involved in, giving emergency counsel to parents on how not to have your children taken from them.
Incredible.
And we have cases that we've handled right exactly dealing with what you're talking about. So I say a big amen. What you're saying is exactly right, and we need to challenge it, and we need to take it seriously. But I never looked at it quite from that same perspective, as being just a part of the playbook.
Yep.
To destruct the family, to destroy the family,
a system,
as opposed to just a twisted, perverted ideology that is just permeating in the public schools as a part of an agenda of being anti-conventional. But it's much more a part of the game plan.
Yes.
And you talk about that in your book.
We do. So when we discovered this system, and really by accident, they say a lot of discoveries happen by accident, and we were just tracking the history of things that happened, and we go through Spain, well, as I said, and Franco is responsible. We go through France, and which leads to the rise of Napoleon and the complete insanity that was going on in the French Revolution, beheading of parents, beheading of priests and nuns. By the way, the religious, this is another thread. So the family is one. The religious is probably the only one that comes a little bit ahead of the families. Is if you are a priest, if you are a nun, if you're a religious leader, you are done. You are the first person that they go after. And you see this, of course, with what they're doing to the people who protest at abortion centers. If you stand in someone's way in front of an abortion center, now Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice under Biden will give you 2 years, it'll give you 5 years, you can be 75 years old, they don't care.
We have a case just like that. It's out of Michigan.
Okay.
And we're defending a pastor, and he, along with some others, blocked the entranceway of an abortion clinic. He was trespassing. Normally, you're looking at maybe 28 days at the most behind bars.
Right.
No. Biden's Department of Justice is prosecuting him for up to 11 years behind bars.
Yes.
And it's not just isolated. They are on a witch hunt to go after people of faith who peacefully are demonstrating, and yet those thugs violently demonstrating, threatening, that we see happening on the college campuses we saw in 2020. I don't see any prosecution at all. So
well, if you're blocking a road, as one of their main tactics, then certainly you're blocking somebody by
Right.
dint of statistics. Statistically, you are probably blocking someone from going to an abortion clinic, and yet nobody is, unfortunately, in society today. But of course, no one's going to prosecute them. But this again,
It's a double standard.
it's, well, here's what we say in response to the double standard contention is, yes, of course it is a double standard, but it's also useful for us to understand that the double standard is something that you see in every single instance that this system is applied to a
Right.
destabilization of a country. You always see the double standards, and this is a tactic we refer to as anarcho-tyranny. So anarchy and tyranny combined.
Yeah.
So it's tyranny for your enemies and full anarcho autonomy
Yeah.
for your friends.
Right.
And so if if we were leftists right now and we were, blocking traffic or throwing paint on the Mona Lisa or smashing up a church, we get a slap on the wrist. But if you or I were caught with a penknife going onto a plane, now you're a domestic terrorist. Because again, it's always about punishing the class that is standing against the revolution. And so at the very end of the book, by the way, we come up with a counter system to all of this to disrupt the things that they're doing. And you guys don't need any information on this because you know exactly how to fight back. It's you must fight them directly, you must
Right.
fight them indirectly, and so people need to support organizations like yours and all of the great organizations that are here that are organizing and actually fighting back in the streets. And if anything, this gives you the tools to understand that we're never going to convince the committed cultural Marxists of the error of their ways, because ultimately their goal is never to just win one case. Their goal is never to just win an argument. Their goal is the direct destabilization of society. And so if they lose a case, they'll just go right to the next one.
Right. Well, I'm really excited about your book on humans. I already can tell that it has a lot of insight that I know I need to be exposed to. It's dealing not just with what's happening, but why it's happening.
Yes.
And the whole formula that's being implemented. So I know it's going to be very enlightening, something that we can use to not just understand what's happening, but also to know how to deal with it, how to identify it, and how to address it, and hopefully save America. So Jack,
That's what it's all about.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for being on this program. And I know we at Pacific Justice Institute look forward to working with you and those that you interact with that need help in standing up for our rights, our freedom, and preserving our nation. God bless you.
God bless.
Thank you.